allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Arthur Patterson,
Present.
Present.
Commissioner Divney,
Present.
Commissioner Marsters,
Present.
Chair Clapper.
Present. Approval of the minutes for the March 19th meeting. I was not here, and Commissioner Divney was also not. What? Oh, public comment. Well, I was just kind of accelerating things. Thank you. Okay. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act, Government Code Section 54954.2. However, the commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on a future commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. Is there anyone here that wanted to speak about anything that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the minutes for March 19th.
One really small, almost silly thing. It's supposed to be 10-day right of appeal. It just says 10 right of appeal. So very small typo on this, on what would be the third page. Under 4, I'm sorry, under 5. Under number 5?
Yes.
Got it, okay, that's it.
Okay. Motion, please.
Move to approve with the adjustments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then Commissioner Gibney and Commissioner Clapper are abstaining. New business. Item A, consideration of the Planning Commission to select a representative of the Planning Commission at the call for review April 9th regarding the City Council consideration of a conditional use permit for the Carlos Club at 612 El Camino Real. So does staff have some information that they would like to offer to us first before we discuss this topic?
This is just kind of a brief summary from the staff report that was prepared for your meeting. The planning, this arises out of the question at your last meeting, or maybe not your last meeting, but the meeting on the 19th, that a question came up about what the Planning Commission's role is at the review hearing that was set by the City Council from your prior decision regarding the Carlos Club. And this agenda item was agendized because of the language in the zoning ordinance that says the Planning Commission may be represented at the hearing. And the Planning Commission is also, in an earlier section, provided notice of a review hearing. So the idea was to provide the way to answer your question was to look at the code and then provide an agenda item that would allow for consideration of those points. The way the two approaches that can be taken are set forth in the staff report. One is not to send a representative, and just if you were interested in the particular item, you could speak as a member of the public, not on behalf of the commission as a whole. Or you could be available to answer questions, or you could not attend. So it's really just arising out of that section of the zoning ordinance that says the Planning Commission may be represented at the hearing. And again, in order for you to consider that, it had to be agendized.
And that is drawing a distinction between an appeal by the public versus a review? Or is there no distinction?
There's no real distinction in the code as far as Planning Commission may be represented at the hearing. It just hasn't come up before. It was a question that you asked as a group at the last meeting. If you want a recommendation, my recommendation is, there's really no need to have a Planning Commissioner representative at the City Council hearing. There's a long record from this for this particular item. The record will of your prior deliberations will be part of that record. They're going to be attached to the staff report. And so there's not a need for the planning commission to comment on what you've already decided, really. So if the option that, if you choose not to do that, you could just have members of the planning commission available or not. And it would be an individual decision of each planning commissioner at that point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just kind of see what the consensus is from everyone here, or is there a preference to approach this in a different way?
Well, I'm the one that asked the question, so I guess I'll just jump in and say what I feel. I asked the question because according to my new commissioner handbook, it mentioned that it was appropriate for commissioners to attend council meetings where planning issues were being discussed. Since this was obviously an issue where planning issues were being discussed, I thought it would be appropriate. And I was genuinely curious what a role would be. However, I'm absolutely fine to let the record speak for itself. I don't think we need to select a representative. Certainly, if we were to select one, it would be you as the chair, in my opinion, but I don't think that's necessary. I'm absolutely fine to let our deliberations speak. So that's where I stand. And since I asked the question, I thought I'd just throw that out there first.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I have to say it was helpful to have the video because I was able to vicariously live through the last meeting by being able to watch it.
It was like you were
It was a thrill, it really was.
They're very
Special
good.
instant streaming, so, okay. But that aside, then are there any commissioners that have a different point of view that they would like to share with the commission? Or just any thoughts you'd like to share with the commission about this topic? Don't ramble on about anything. We get to do that at the end of the meeting, but, no, okay.
I cannot attend that commission meeting, or the city council meeting. I won't be here. So, Greg, what do we do if we do have a point of view? How do we get it on the record and make sure that, because we've been there's a lot of scuttle underneath that we look like a bunch of village idiots, to put it bluntly.
Well, that would come with your, as a citizen, you still can comment on a matter. You just wouldn't be speaking on behalf of the commission itself, but you could talk about your thoughts and why you decided to vote or decide the way you did.
And how does that get delivered?
That could also be in writing, right?
That could be in writing.
Presented
right.
at the meeting or in
Right.
writing. But if it's in writing, it needs to be before the city
That's
council
right.
meeting. They need to receive it prior to the meeting.
It's just like the rules in our rules for public hearing. The review is a public hearing, just conducted just like an appeal. So the record would include correspondence and matters that were submitted at or before the meeting.
And we send it to whom?
You'd send it to either planning staff or to the city clerk.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this topic? There seems to be a consensus to participate in this process individually. And so I would just, unless someone else has another comment, I think we'll just move on to the next item on the agenda. I don't think we have to take a vote, do we?
No, that's just
No, okay.
Information.
Okay, very good. And we can always revisit this at the end. All right, new business item B, 1119 Industrial Road, Suite G, architectural review for one new wall sign visible from US Highway 101 for the King's Swim Academy. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm Jill Lewis, and I'm presenting the request for architectural review approval of a new wall sign for King's Swim Academy. So, as you can see from this map, the address 1119 Industrial Road, Suite G, is immediately west of US Highway 101. The zoning and the general plan designation are general commercial/industrial. And the King's Swim Academy will be occupying the space formerly leased by Wallens Dive Center. The applicant proposes to install one internally illuminated facelit channel letter wall sign on the eastern face of the building at 1119 Industrial Road, which is very much visible from US Highway 101. The subject installation will contain approximately 60.3 square feet of signage. The individual channel letters, which are made of aluminum with a blue acrylic face, will comprise the sign spelling out King Swim Academy in all capital letters. And this sign will replace the former wall sign for Wallens Dive Center. The reason this is before you tonight, as I mentioned, this property is immediately adjacent to US Highway 101, and a section in our zoning ordinance requires architectural review for signage visible from 101. These are the 4 findings that you are asked to make tonight, and included in the staff report. Staff believes that the commission can make these 4 findings in regards to the sign proposal at hand. So it is recommended that you approve the request for architectural review of the 60.3 square foot wall sign for King's Swim Academy. And this is the recommended formal motion should you choose to approve the sign. And at this point, I can take any questions you might have of staff.
I just have one question. It's about the draft code compliance certificate on number 3. The lighting shall not produce glare or spillover to adjacent properties. Was that a problem with the previous sign at all?
No, this is just a standard condition we tack into these freeway signs.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I figured, just given where it was placed.
Sure.
But knowing that that can be a problem, I just wanted to make sure.
Right.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
As a matter of perspective, is this bigger or smaller than the current sign?
It's roughly the exact same size.
Okay.
Any other commissioner comment or questions? Okay. Since this is new business and not under public hearing, I'm assuming I don't need to call for public comment. Is that correct?
You do need to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on the item.
Okay. Is there anyone here who is interested in speaking on this application for the sign? No? Okay. Seeing none?
You might want to see if the applicant is out here and.
No,
Yeah, that's not-
actually, from talking to Jill, I know that the applicant is not here, but
Okay.
thank you for inquiring about that, and the applicant thanks you also. Okay. Could I have a motion for approval then?
Sure. I move that the Planning Commission approve King's Swim Academy's request for architectural review, approval of 160.3 square foot wall for King's Swim Academy at 1119 Industrial Road, Suite G, based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? No? Okay. All right. Under new business, item C, consideration of Planning Commission work plan.
Good evening, Deborah Nelson, Planning Manager. This, tonight is a report on your current fiscal year work that you've accomplished to date, and we intend for you to accomplish by the end of June, and a consideration of a work plan for the new fiscal year. The council adopted this process as part of the budget about 3 years ago. And a number of your work program items stay the same year after year. You are advisory body to the city council, and items such as you just heard are typical on every agenda of your meetings, and you've accomplished a lot in that regard this year, and architectural review of commercial buildings and signage and use permits, and commercial service uses and grading and dirt haul permits, residential design review, and an appeal of a zoning administrator's decision. You also act in the capacity as one member on the Residential Design Review Committee, and recently, as we reported last time, that committee looked at a process for staff reports and noticing as a result of the new zoning ordinance that went into effect December 28th. Regarding that zoning ordinance, you were really busy last year with study sessions and public hearings, and had a follow-up public hearing after having recommended adoption of the zoning ordinance. In January, you looked at one tweak that we needed to do regarding noticing in the zoning ordinance. On the council strategic plan, there were a number of items on the strategic plan last year. So what's projected forward is nothing, at least in the first 6 months, except as it relates to economic development, which will be Wheeler Plaza and the Transit Village review, and we see those as multiple meetings each. The Wheeler Plaza, of course, you'll see at the next item this evening for the final environmental impact report, and the transit, and you'll also see the development entitlement approvals later in the year. And regarding the Transit Village, you'll be looking at an EIR, which is to be released this summer. We've been working with our consultants on putting together the final since January, and that work is ongoing, but you'll see it soon. And then you'll also see the entitlement process in this next fiscal year. And then the municipal code. You were busy on the municipal code too. You made recommendations for 6 titles of the municipal code to be changed consistent with the new zoning ordinance adoption. And there may be a number that come up this next fiscal year too. We'll see as we proceed through. So again, you'll have a full plate, and we would like you to accept the progress report on the current year and recommend to the City Council, this is just a adoption of your next year's work program. And here would be the recommendation.
I have a question. What's the definition of FTE in terms of hours? Is that 2,000 hours approximately?
2010, I believe it is.
Well, okay,
Yes,
so it's
yes,
the
yeah.
normal 40 times 52. Okay. So 2/10 would be,
Right, and not all of these represent the total of the staff that you see, because we have day-to-day activities that don't come before you.
Commissioner Sanfilippo, did you have any other comments or questions about the
no,
work
I'm
plan?
fine.
Okay. Commissioner Harper Pedersen, did you?
Just one quick one. The downtown parking study, and forgive me if this is the wrong place to ask, but I know we had appointed a representative, and that representative was me. I was just wondering.
I'm glad to hear you remembered that. Okay, I was a little worried here.
And yet I haven't heard anything since, so I was just wondering what the progress on that was and when I might hear something.
We're going to the City Council with a contract suggestion. It's either the next meeting or the meeting following. And once we get into contract with the consultant, then we will have input from the group that we've asked for participation from, which includes you and others. TNC also. So,
Thank you.
mhm.
No, I think this looks great.
Okay. Commissioner Dibney?
I'll risk making a somewhat snarky remark on an item that I'm not talking about tonight. I'll just say that I enjoy my time.
Could you flip your microphone around so we can capture each individual
Sure.
syllable?
At the risk of making a somewhat snarky remark, I would say that I enjoy my time as a planning commissioner making land use advice recommendations for land use matters to the city council. And I'm fine with the plan.
Thank you.
I'm
Commissioner
fine with the
Marsters?
plan.
Okay. I have a few questions for the upcoming work plan. So is the green building code going to be anything that comes in front of the planning commission in any way for the next fiscal year?
No, it goes directly to the City Council. There was a green building code adopted following the general plan and climate action plan, which was based on the California Green Code. That item was before the council this past week, and they have asked that they see an enhanced version of that code, which the building official brings directly to them. But
Okay.
it is
Just
in the
curious.
department, but it goes directly to the council.
Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering if it would be appropriate for the last three items, the Wheeler Plaza project, the Transit Village project, and the municipal code, that under participants, it be consistent in including the planning commission, because it seems like kind of by inference, the planning commission would be included in all of these, but they're listed in the first ones, and then the last two, Transit Village and municipal code, kind of conspicuous by our absence there. And if we could add something about other related commissions, so that as appropriate, they could be brought in, particular transportation and circulation, or EDAC. In some cases, EDAC is mentioned here, but I think especially for Wheeler Plaza, Transit Village, and the municipal code, that it might be appropriate for us to be collaborating with the other commissions.
Absolutely, I can make those changes.
Aren't we by design? Aren't we already included? This is our,
It's our work.
it's our work plan, isn't it? Are we by just definition included?
Yeah, you are.
Well, yeah, but it's just, that's why
I-
I didn't notice, and then I started looking at the.
I don't want to get in the weeds on this, I'm just asking.
Well,
It's listed under some and not listed under.
I understand.
Right, right.
And I
So
was
we'll
just
make
kind of
that
in a wordsmithing
consistent.
mood when I read
Yeah.
through this, and so therefore I'm
It's okay,
channeling
Karen.
those thoughts to you. You can take them or,
No, I can make it consistent and also add the collaborative aspect, which I think that's an important point that I
I think
missed, so
especially
thank
for
you.
the two large development projects, and also for the municipal code, because we're not sure what that may be, and I think it might be appropriate to include some of the other commissioners from other commissions in that process. Do any of the other planning commissioners have a thought on that? Does that not sound right? Or will you just let me have my little nitpicky wordsmithing
Quite
way?
frankly, the other commissioners, or other commissions is very appropriate.
Okay.
The ones affected, that is. That's a
Yeah, I
good-
just-
that's actually a good
I
point.
kind of want it on here, so when we're thinking
Mm-hmm.
through these, where that's kind of part of our checklist of to what extent are we integrating
Right.
the work that we're doing with what we can, the value we can leverage from the other commissions, since they have a lot of good experience.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Any other comments? Okay, then I would look for a motion.
Is that?
Oh, on
I think
this?
that's
Sent it
on
over.
the-
Oh, okay.
That's not what we're
Oh,
talking about.
this is on Wheeler, okay. Is there anyone here present this evening that has a comment about the agenda item we're discussing right now, the Planning Commission's work plan for the upcoming fiscal year? No, okay. Then I would ask for a motion.
I'd like to recommend that the Planning Commission accept the progress report for fiscal year 2011, 2012 work plan and review and discuss and recommend, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Not at all. Review and discuss.
That's why I didn't read it.
And recommend that let's just say we recommend the progress report for fiscal year 2011, 2012, and recommend approval or recommend sending to the city council the 2012, 2013 work plan.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? No, okay, passes unanimously. All right, on to page 2. Okay, public hearing. Procedure for the public hearing. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, et cetera, on the application, followed with the staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public meeting. Speakers should fill out a speaker's form found by the door and hand it to the recording secretary prior to addressing the commission. The speaker should come up to the microphone to speak since the meeting is being recorded. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. And the item for public hearing is the Wheeler Plaza Redevelopment Project Final Environmental Impact Report. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Tonight, what I'll do is I'll provide you with a brief overview, and we have Rebecca Groten here from Lamphere Gregory, who is the primary preparer of the document, and we also have Matt Goring with Fair and Piers, the transportation engineer. If you have any questions, I'm going to ask Rebecca to share this presentation and get up and walk you through the details of the environmental component of the report. But I'll just back up a little bit. I'm not going to spend too much time on the background other than to maybe fill in some blanks for you, as I know you've gone through this a couple of times in the past. The city and the redevelopment agency initiated the Wheeler Plaza development site, and as you know, redevelopment agencies in the state of California have been eliminated, dissolved. As a result, it put into any properties that were purchased with redevelopment agency dollars that weren't dedicated to creating affordable housing are now intended to be sold, and the proceeds of those sales of the public properties would then go to the taxing entities throughout the county in the area. You know, it's the state, as part of the legislation, AB 26, set up what they call an oversight board. And this oversight board is made up of the city and the largest taxing entities, a few of the largest taxing entities in the county. And so we have an oversight board for the city of San Carlos. And the oversight board is made up of 2 members of the city council, which is the mayor and the city manager, the county, who has 2 representatives, so the county of San Mateo, the Sequoia High School District, who has 1 representative, and the local community college district, which has 1 representative, and also the library district with 1 representative. So it's a 7-member board, and this board is charged with making a determination on the sale of the city properties. The agency that then took the place of redevelopment agency is called the successor agency. It succeeds the redevelopment agency. So now we have a San Carlos successor agency that's been set up. And our economic development functions will take place in that umbrella, in the successor agency umbrella now. It's up to the successor agency to work with the oversight board and the taxing entities to determine and to assist the board on what to do with the city properties moving forward. And it's an untested territory. All the cities in the state of California are kind of feeling their way ahead. The legislation that was crafted was very unclear as to how to proceed, and there's lots of questions as we go into this uncharted territory. So, but we are moving. We've had 1 oversight board meeting. We had a couple of weeks ago, and we have several oversight board meetings set up in the next couple of weeks to make determinations on what to do with the city properties. And so 2 of those city properties, and I'll point them out on some maps in just a moment, are critical to the Wheeler Plaza project, and I'll talk about how it ties in with this idea of the successor agency and the oversight board. But the EIR process was initiated to evaluate the 3 projects in the downtown. And the reason that we're moving forward, a couple of different reasons. One of the things when the state dissolved the redevelopment agency boards, they said that if you have a contractual obligation with the redevelopment agency, you can continue that work. So some projects were allowed to move forward, and this one was one of them. We had a contractual obligation with the EIR preparer, and we're able to finish this project, which is really a milestone for any development project in a downtown anywhere. It takes a lot of time and effort to get through this process, and it's quite valuable, whether the project goes forward as it's assembled together today, or if it goes forward in a different configuration. This is a milestone step for this development, the EIR consideration. So it's really 3 projects in the downtown. The Wheeler Plaza project we talk about, we're familiar with. It's 108 housing units, almost 10,000 square feet of retail space, and the parking spaces, some of which are underground for the residential and some of which are above ground for the public spaces. And the Foodville site is another component of the Wheeler Plaza site. What we heard through the process, talking to the public and stakeholders, is that people wanted some kind of a public amenity. The Foodville site was purchased by the city to make way for a public plaza and also a retail space in an office building. And then we have Cherry Street Senior Affordable Housing Project that's been made possible by this development as well. So it's really 3 projects that make up the Wheeler Plaza development project. And just to give you some context in the downtown, it's located here along Walnut Street. Here's San Carlos Avenue at terminus with the Caltrain Depot, and Laurel Street here in between. And so here's the Wheeler Plaza parking lot, which is owned by the city of San Carlos. And drilling down, just taking a closer look, this is Walnut Street, San Carlos Avenue, Laurel Street. The blue area represents the Wheeler Plaza development site, and it includes the parcels that have been assembled over the years. These 2 parcels, the Foodville building and the office building, or the furniture building rather, were purchased with these RDA dollars where we would, under the legislation, have to sell that and give the proceeds to the taxing entities. These 2 properties, this one here where Hole in One Liquor is and the dry cleaner, and this one, which is a small apartment building, were purchased with housing funds. And there's a separation between RDA funds that aren't used for housing and ones that are. The ones that are used for housing, the state legislation says that the city can keep, we think the city can keep those properties and use them for affordable housing and establish an housing function in the city to take over those properties. And so these properties, we believe, would then stay in this development. It's really these 2 properties which are very critical to moving forward with this development. What we'll be doing is we'll be talking to the Oversight Board about the economics of including these in the Wheeler Plaza development and allowing this project to move forward based on the economics and the positive benefit to those taxing entities.
I hate to do this to you in the middle of your presentation. I need to get something straight. So when they got rid of the development agency, it was not only cash, but it was also whatever fiscal assets the city owned that the funds were used at one point to buy.
That's correct.
And so if the Oversight Committee says, and you have a piece of land out in the middle of nowhere, someplace in San Carlos, it's not tied to anything, they can say, well, we have to sell that, and then the money would go to the state. Is that what happens to the money?
Yeah, it goes
Essentially,
to a controller who distributes it to all the
whatever.
taxing entities.
We don't have it
Yes.
anymore. But if we have an integral piece of property, such as in this particular case, that's mixed and matched with housing funds that were used to purchase property, then there is likely maybe opportunity that they'll say, well, you should keep those. From an economic standpoint, you need to be able to get the best benefit for all those, for the money that was spent over. Is that kind of what this?
That's
I
correct.
just want to make sure.
So I'm just giving you, sort of filling in
Yeah,
the
no,
blanks.
and I'm sorry to
It's outside
interrupt you.
the
I just wanted
context
to
of
make
the
sure I
item.
had it straight.
No problem, and it helps to understand the context, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions I can answer, it's very complicated. And so one other component of this project is this area here, which is where what is analyzed as the Cherry Street Senior Affordable Housing Project. And this is an apartment building that's operated by HIP Housing, which is an affordable housing operator. And the city of San Carlos assisted them in securing funding for their operation. and we've talked to them, and they're agreeable to doing this development. We have spoken with the owner of this property here, which is an optometrist's business. We've spoken with the owner. We've had some informal discussions about our interest in purchasing this property and including it in this development project. This is the context, now kind of getting back into the EIR, this is the context in the surrounding area in terms of the heights and scales and massing of the building in the area. Right across the street, we have the Samtrans building. Then on Walnut Street, we have Pacific Hacienda, which is a tall building. This is a site plan that we talked about in some detail at the Joint Planning Commission and Transportation and Circulation Commission meeting, and we can always refer back to it. But San Carlos Avenue again, and Walnut, and this is where the retail component would be, and then the condominium development would be here, and the entrance, the key entrance, main entrance and exit point would be on Walnut Street for the parking garage. And then you have this loading area that would be used during the day for service vehicles, only during the day. And then you have the Foodville development with the new plaza. In terms of the public review to date, there's, to get an EIR to this stage is quite a process, and it usually takes a year or sometimes two. We've had a lot of public input. We've shown the document and the project to the public a number of different times. As I noted, we had a joint planning commission, Transportation Circulation Commission. It came back to the Planning Commission recently. Transportation and Circulation Commission back in March recommended that the Planning Commission and City Council they found that the transportation section of the EIR was adequate for your consideration, and passed a resolution in that regard, saying that you should look at it, you should use it, it's adequate for consideration of the final EIR. In terms of your role, you're the final recommending body to the City Council, and so what we're asking for this evening is recommendation to the City Council on the certification of the final document that it's adequate. And what I'm going to do now is hand it back over to Rebecca, and she'll talk more about the details.
Good evening. There were 17 potentially significant impacts identified through the environmental analysis process in the topic areas listed there. I'll go over them very briefly as we've already discussed them previously. They relate to construction period dust and emissions, tree removal and the potential to disturb nesting birds, the potential to disturb cultural resources that are otherwise undiscovered during excavation, the need to engineer for a seismically active area, the potential for hazardous building materials in structures to be demolished, and known soil contamination from the dry cleaner on the site. Erosion and sedimentation during construction period noise, and rooftop equipment and the noise levels at the new residences. Also in traffic, circulation within the garage, and cumulative impacts at two intersections, Holly Street and Laurel Street and Cherry Street and Laurel Street. These were discussed in detail at the study session on February 6th and are summarized in the staff report for this item tonight. All of these impacts can be mitigated to a level of less than significant through the mitigation outlined in the draft EIR as revised by the final EIR. The mitigation measures have been compiled into a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, which is included also as an attachment to the staff report. This mitigation monitoring and reporting plan would be adopted and applied to future projects. With implementation of these mitigation measures, the project would not result in any significant impacts. The Traffic and Circulation Commission had a focused review of the traffic report. We spoke with them on January 25th and then back again on March 20th. And they did recommend that the Planning Commission and City Council consider the traffic report and adopt the final EIR. So since we've spoken to the Planning Commission, the final EIR has been prepared and circulated. It includes revisions made to the draft EIR in response to comments that we received both from written letters and verbal comments that we received at meetings before the Planning Commission and the Transportation and Circulation Commission. And also includes by reference the draft EIR itself. So I will be here to answer any questions if there are any additional questions on the EIR tonight.
Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution recommending that the city adopt the final environmental impact report, the mitigation monitoring reporting program, mitigation measures, and make the findings as well. And we have a motion here, but I'm going to back up and go ahead and, as Rebecca noted, staff is here. We're available to answer any questions that the Planning Commission has this evening, and that really concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions that commissioners have of staff right now before we open up to the public?
I think that this revised, or the final report, it was very well done. I think that it was very politely done as well, I should add. I still have heartburn over this Walnut Cherry traffic issue, and it's really, not that I'm around San Carlos all day long during the week, but on the weekends, it's unbelievable what's going on there. And even with Foodville now not there anymore, it seems to be worse. So the solution, as I understand it, is to enact the signal over at Laurel and Holly and put a four-way stop sign at Cherry and Walnut. Is that kind of what I'm getting? Otherwise, everything's pretty much the same.
What I'd like to do is ask Mr. Goying to get up and address your transportation question.
Hi. Thanks for, pardon me. Thanks for the question. So if I understand you correct, you're asking about the intersection of Walnut and Cherry Street, which is on the corner of the project. This intersection currently operates at an acceptable level of service during the weekdays. And based on our analysis, we did some sensitivity analysis to determine what effects would happen at this intersection if various levels of traffic were added to it. And so what we did is we looked at what would happen if the project traffic was added, which would be approximately 20 to 25 trips during the peak hour. And then also what would happen if you added, say, additional traffic to make it so that it did not operate acceptably anymore. And that was found to be an additional 100 to 200 trips to this intersection. The findings from this is that it has available capacity to handle additional trips through this intersection, and that it would not operate unacceptably according to the standards put forth in the general plan.
Now, you said weekdays.
That's correct.
What about weekends? Because that's when it seems to be the worst.
So as part of the EIR process, we study what are typically your worst traffic condition times. And so that would be during the PM peak hour, during the AM peak hour. And so this intersection in itself and all the intersections were studied during those times. That is when the traffic impacts to the entire street network will be the worst. And it's also at which time the traffic volumes are the worst, so from the project.
And so I guess I'm not understanding. What days are we talking about, or what's the peak period? I know AM and PM, I understand that. Is that on a Saturday and Sunday? Is that a Wednesday? Is that a Friday?
And so that would be a typical midweek day, so like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday and Monday volumes typically fluctuate a lot more, but your typical day, this is meant to represent what is the typical traffic during the worst period during that day. And so that would be 4 to 6 p.m. in the case of downtown San Carlos. When everyone's returning from work, people are going out to run errands. that sort of thing.
I would think there's a lot more traffic on a Saturday, or at least a Saturday at a minimum, than any other time during the week. Because everybody who works outside the area, I would think, are doing what they can't do during the week. And I'm confused over why we wouldn't take that into consideration.
It's based off standard engineering procedures and really take into account for all your entire transportation system when the most people are out, and that typically is the PM peak hour. It's studies, many studies will show that, especially around more residential heavy area.
So what does the traffic control mitigating measures do to ease any of this pain?
So
I assume that's what the purpose of
Of
doing-
course. And so there were two mitigations to the two cumulatively significant impacted intersections. These two intersections were at Hawley Street and Laurel, and at Laurel Street and Cherry Street. What these mitigations do is at the intersection of Hawley and Laurel Street is activate the signal, which is currently there. It's currently flashing red. It's an always stop sign. And what would happen in the future is that an always stop has a certain capacity to it, and the signal, by turning on the signal, it can increase the capacity, hence allowing that intersection to operate acceptably. At the intersection of at Cherry and Laurel Street, that intersection is currently a two-way stop sign. The traffic flows freely on Cherry Street. Thus, cars that are coming up to the approach on Laurel Street have to stop, and with the increase of traffic, they would not be able to find an acceptable gap to squeeze in between traffic. And so by putting an always stop at that intersection, which is the mitigation, you would allow acceptable gaps for all approaches, and thus no one would have to wait for an extended period of time.
So that means that the enacting the signal, or activating the signal, I guess, basically takes care of the eastbound traffic, or from east to west, right? I mean, that theoretically, that's where they're coming from.
That's true. Yeah.
Folks would be coming from. What about the people who come from San Carlos up in the hills and what have you, off Britain? How do you deal with that population, which I would think is much larger?
So by activating the signal, you are helping all directions.
Really?
It's a stop sign, basically always stop, which is what the intersection currently operates, has a certain capacity, and then it pretty much doubles once you are able to put a signal on it. And that's just because the signal is more efficient, allows vehicles to not stop on the main approaches. Not everyone has to stop when you get there, because there'll be the green lights for the heaviest movements. And thus, turning on that signal will improve everyone's approach to that intersection.
But a larger proportion of people are coming from the southwest part of San Carlos, which would mean that signal doesn't even enter into the equation. That's what I'm trying to figure out. How do you deal with the rest of the population of people that are going to come down to this location to do whatever we're going to put in the retail space and so on and so forth?
Okay, so you're referring to just
Yeah,
all the rest
so
of it.
people are going to come from Highway 101 or that direction. They're going to come onto that signal that we're now going to activate, and that's going to take care of that flow of folks that are going to be coming in. But then you have the rest of the population in San Carlos that live further west, either up in the hills or in White Oaks and all those areas. They won't even get close to that signal.
Yeah, of course.
That's what I'm trying to understand how that works.
And so what we did is we selected nearby intersections, adjacent intersections that we thought could potentially be impacted. These intersections, by analyzing these intersections and analyzing the distribution of traffic through these intersections, we're analyzing the most heavily impacted intersections. And from our analysis, we found that the project traffic would not have a significant impact at these intersections. Thus, as you move farther away to other intersections, farther away from the project, it's going to have a lessening impact.
No, I'm with you. I mean, none of that though seems to address the Walnut and Cherry intersection enough for me. And I don't know if maybe there's another way to address it that I'm unaware of. But I mean, it says that it's not projected to require any further study. And then it talks later that the residents have expressed concerns about pedestrian safety also on the approaches to Cherry, and that the city could determine in the future to do additional pedestrian crossings. I guess I'm just not understanding why we would wait until the future to do that.
In determining,
To deal with the Cherry and Walnut
of
intersection.
course. And so that's a specific issue that the city should address. Should residents bring that up as a serious concern to the city staff that there are pedestrian safety issues here? It should be addressed in that manner.
So we would build the whole thing, wait for the residents to get
Well,
frustrated
so-
about walking across the street, and then build the bulb outs and the nice crosswalk?
So what our analysis is looking at is under cumulative conditions is where you would see the increase. And since cumulative conditions is theoretical in nature, it's based on,
Right.
of course, all those projections of growth. We recommend that the city keep tabs on that and keep follow it and make sure that should this intersection become an issue in cumulative as all this other growth is going through the neighborhood, then at that point, that's when they should address the intersection. And the project, however, is not necessarily adding the traffic to this intersection that would create the need for an impact to pedestrian conditions.
And so the way that we could approach this, and I mean, if you feel very uncomfortable with the situation in terms of pedestrian, putting in a crosswalk or something, you could recommend that as part of the mitigations of the project, even though it's not warranted per se. If you as a commission feel that it's a critical component to your decision-making, you can say that it's something that the city should analyze further. And the way that's done is we have a transportation safety task force, or a pedestrian and transportation safety task force with the Public Works Department and the police department staff and engineering folks, transportation engineer and others, and police experts in this field. And what we do is if we get a complaint at an intersection, we'll analyze the intersection. We'll look at, if we've had any complaints, we'll look at the movements of people and vehicles through the intersection. We'll look at if there was ever any accidents at this intersection. We'll look at the businesses in the area. And if it's warranted, we'll have a crosswalk put in, not a stop sign, but a crosswalk could be considered in this location. Quite frankly, this is the first time that I've ever heard anybody complain about this intersection, and you'd think that there would be more because you have the Elms next door and you've got downtown there. And I walk this going to downtown for lunch. I've never been frightened crossing that intersection, but I could see how other people could be with the amount of traffic that it gets. So again, if you'd like us to take a look at this, you could add that as something that you want us to look as a mitigation measure. A condition of project approval, rather, yes.
A crosswalk, but not a four-way stop.
A four-way stop has to be warranted.
I see.
Yeah, it's the city has, and the state actually has, and actually, Matt, you could talk about signal warrants, but perhaps you could do that. Explain
Sure.
how signals have to be studied and warranted before we can put them in, if you could. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. And so as part of any signal or stop sign, placing a stop sign, to make sure that there's a proper process that goes through, there are a series of warrants, whether it's the peak hour traffic, which is one way, looking at the peak hour traffic, how many vehicles you have going through the intersection, whether it's the number of pedestrians that you have going through it. There's also sight distance, that sort of thing, whether there's safety concerns. So especially in the case of this intersection, it does not satisfy those sort of warrants to put a signal or to put a stop sign there, and could in fact create other traffic issues if he did. So, in
And
that
Matt,
case,
if I could ask a further question, would there be any traffic-related issues in installing crosswalks at this intersection?
no, there definitely would not be. Crosswalks are meant to improve the visibility and safety of pedestrians, and and that's really what the purpose is for.
So I think that's a reasonable thing to add as a standard condition of the project, to have the city evaluate that, the Traffic Safety Task Force, to look at that. And hopefully that answers your question. Or
I
at
was
least
talking about
addresses some of your
congestion, and we
concern.
went to pedestrians.
I'm sorry, I took it
No,
away
no,
from you.
no,
I
no,
apologize.
it's okay.
It was just the same intersection, so I just kind of jumped on it.
I mean, there's only two
I
ways
was
to get.
I was trying to address
There's only
both.
two ways to get to San Carlos, and that's either Britain or through San Carlos, either through, from that side, from Highway 101, is through Britain or Hawley. Got it. But the biggest part of our population lives west of El Camino in some way, shape, or form. Right now, a lot of people are migrating away from Wheeler Plaza because there really isn't that much commerce going on. Because when Foodville closed, the number of traffic, the amount of traffic, I would assume, slowed down. I would assume. I don't know this for a fact. But it seems to me that we're not dealing with the influx of people that are south, west of El Camino that come from all these surrounding areas. We're only talking about activating a signal on Holly and Laurel. I'm trying to figure out, well, why doesn't that impact the number of visits or the number of people that will come to Wheeler Plaza because of all of the things that are being talked about that we want to do?
So it doesn't affect the number of people coming to the plaza. What that signal is really meant to do is to relieve conditions at that specific intersection, which under cumulative conditions, where we expect a lot of forecasted growth throughout the area, that we're looking 20 years in the future, that you would need a signal at that intersection. The project creates an impact because it does increase just above the threshold, which is a volume capacity threshold of that intersection, which per the general plan, we define that as a significant impact. Hence, the project would have to contribute its fair share or its contribution of cumulative growth to activating that signal, the cost of. So that intersection per se is not dealing with any of the traffic that you're referring to on the southwest side. What our findings show is that the traffic on that southwest side of the project would continue to operate at a level similar to what you see today. And that includes traffic that would get rerouted due to potential closure at San Carlos Avenue if this transit center does go through. And so that traffic would then go to Cherry Street. So we're including some of this future rerouted traffic that would go through that intersection. And we still find that the volumes are not high enough to create a situation where that would be an unacceptable operating intersection.
But isn't there a little bit of circular thinking going on? If your models already have a baseline assumption that commute time weekday, midweek is the peak, without an actual count to your earlier point about what's actually there on a Saturday or weekend, where there's in fact maybe a higher impact on capacity handling at that intersection. Because your model just says, hey, this is what it is, typically based on thousands of studies, doesn't take into account the actual reality or what could be reality at this one intersection.
And we're also following what the general plan, what San Carlos's general plan, how that dictates this sort of study take place. And so based on local conditions here in San Carlos, the general plan dictates that weekday peak periods should be analyzed. And I personally haven't counted that intersection, but I can say that in general, really, and especially we're following the steps outlined in the general plan to identify the impacts. and that's how it really captures what the traffic would be from that project.
I understand, and I still think it's a little circular. I understand the process, and I understand the assumptions, and I think they fit a vast majority of them. It may not fit here is my only point.
Well, I don't know. I think that if you studied it on a Saturday, on a regular Saturday, you may find let's say you did find an increase in traffic, it would still be so far below the threshold that's set forth in the general plan for a negative condition or a condition that would reduce the level of service. It would have to be a huge number of vehicles at one time, like it would have to be a farmer's market, a hot harvest nights. And that, you don't plan your traffic system based on hot harvest nights or something like that. For this project to, it's just not big enough to, again, put us over that threshold. So even if we asked them, well, please study on a Saturday, I can guarantee you that it would still be well below any threshold that where we could actually do anything. And it goes back to that issue of the signal warrant.
Right.
We cannot install a sign. We can, but it's inadvisable. If there's not the engineering to support the installation of a sign, you could put one in, and cities do it. They're called political signs, and the issue there is, it happens. But the issue there is it becomes a risk management issue for the city. If there's an accident at that location, at a sign that's not warranted, a rear ender, or someone gets hurt, then that person can sue the local jurisdiction. And perhaps Greg can speak to this better than myself, but it does raise the risk of a city being open to losing those kinds of lawsuits because it's just not warranted. And so that's why typically cities just stay away from that kind of thing, and we wouldn't recommend it from an engineering standpoint.
Okay, Commissioner Dibny, did you have any other comments or questions
No,
for staff?
I think that totally makes sense, and I think
on that subject or any?
right. I mean, it's a couple dozen cars from this project. I totally understand. I just want to drill down as much as possible so we have that on the record and we've fleshed it out.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Marsters.
Same topic. Different thinking. The Walnut Street south of Cherry Street is essentially a one-lane road. Okay? So when you come to that intersection, when you cross that intersection, if there's a car sitting at that intersection, you cannot really get around that car. You're essentially stuck right there. And so that creates a traffic problem that I'm not sure that you've taken into consideration here. So if there's a car coming north on Walnut that approaches Cherry Street, and there's a car that crosses south across that intersection, they cannot occupy the same space. And so that creates a hazard for that intersection that may not have been taken into consideration here. When you look at it most of the time, you look at it and there's not. Are there cars parked really close to that intersection? So did you take that into consideration, that that's essentially a one-lane road?
We did, in fact, and that's as part of our trip distribution, where we send the vehicles on their way to their destinations. We looked at in coordination with city staff, what streets would people likely use, and there's really very few destinations along Walnut Street as you proceed south from the project. And so, although we did distribute some trips there, it turned out to be one or two vehicles during the peak hour. And so what you would see there then is therefore another vehicle crossing through there, once or twice an hour, which the likeliness of something occurring and it affecting an intersection that operates so well at the moment. And the fact that there's very good sight lines through that area, sight distance would not be an issue. That it's not something that would affect the operations of that intersection significantly.
So you're essentially saying that only 1 or 2 cars an hour go down that street?
That would be added by the project.
That would be added by the project? I find that for all of these residents that are there, their closest grocery store is going to be Bianchini's. And the way they're going to get there is they're going to all go down Walnut in order to get to Bianchini's, because that's the quickest way for them to get there. If they're going to drive and pick up a reasonable amount of groceries, they're going to go down Walnut. That's the way they're going to get there. Then they're going to come back up Walnut, exactly the same way. I just think that 1 or 2 cars an hour just doesn't make sense to me, okay? Looking at what's going to happen at that intersection and what's going to happen on Walnut Street, to me, I think the numbers that you're projecting are far too low. And I think they're going to that intersection is going to have a much greater impact than you're predicting. And you know, maybe what we have to do here is we have to recommend that the city keep an eye on it and do something. But I think that, you know, to me, the way I look at this is the same situation occurred when the San Carlos Marketplace went in, okay? All the studies said that you could make a left off of El Camino and get into San Carlos Marketplace, and there wouldn't be a real impact on El Camino. There was a huge impact on El Camino when that happened, and the city had to redesign that entire intersection and actually open up an area behind some of the ancillary stores that are there. I think the same thing is going to happen here. There's going to be a very big impact on the corner of Cherry and Walnut, similar to that. You're just not seeing it yet.
Well, again, as you noted, you could put something in to have us, you know, keep an eye on the intersection over time.
Yeah.
So that's something you could put in as project condition, that the city, you know, evaluate the intersection on an annual basis or something like that.
I guess the question is,
There's a lot of questions there, so I don't know.
do we wait until there's a problem to address it, or do we try and address the problem in advance?
Well, the problem is that you have, in living in the community, you have different perceptions. And I, as living here myself, I drive these streets and walk them, and so our perceptions of impact may be different than common engineering, traffic engineering, and general plan numbers. And so the difficulty for our city is actually engineering the roadway to support something that we think is going to happen when the engineering is telling us that it's not. And so, again, that goes to, well, what do you do? There's not, the only thing that, there's very few sort of options in this regard. We talked about the warrant. One of the other issues is that because we're a built-out community that was built a long time ago, our roads are narrow. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to be patient with the other person that's, as you know, you have to wait on Walnut if you're going to go down to Bianchini's. And so the issue here is the engineering is telling us it's, to make structural changes to these intersections as a result of the number of trips that are generated by this project they're not warranted. So what we would do is we would monitor the intersection and we would certainly make changes if they were warranted over time. But currently, again, our traffic engineering and again, the Traffic and Circulation Commission takes these things very seriously and looked at this very closely. And they're not an easy group to get a traffic report through. But they had a lot of questions, as you heard when you had your joint meeting, about this intersection. And there's engineers on that commission, and they felt that after hearing the responses by the traffic engineer, they felt confident enough in the traffic report that they recommended to the plant, passed a resolution and made a recommendation that it was adequate, and that that you should consider it as adequate. So I think that, saying, kind of looking at this and saying, are we going to wait for a problem here? What the engineers are telling us on the data is that there isn't going to be one from this project. And so, again, I would say that if you want to put caution into your consideration, put a condition in the project, or have the city, monitor the intersection on a yearly basis, and look at the pedestrian safety potential there, and we'll move forward.
Is there something that we could recommend to pull the vehicles back away from the intersection? So right now, the vehicles can park really close to the intersection, and that may be part of the problem getting through that intersection. And I don't know. I'm probably comfortable leaving it to the city to monitor this and look at it. But that's one of the things that I would also look at, is how close the vehicles can park to the intersection itself, and whether there's any way that could be pulled back a little bit, giving additional room for vehicles to pass.
If you look at, I don't know if you have your draft report, but on page 4-11 of the draft report, in figures 4.3a and 4.3b, it shows the intersection. And yes, indeed, there are distances that vehicles are to be set away from an intersection, and you'll see that there's some red curbing. At least on the left-hand side, you can kind of see it, and maybe a little bit on the right-hand side. That there is a distance that cars are not to park because of sight distances there. And so the city does have a standard distance, and we can see that it's painted there. Perhaps it's not painted, maybe the distance is not adequate.
This side, yeah.
So we can look and see and take measurements to see that it conforms to the municipal code, to see that those distances conform to our code, to make sure, because again, the intent is to keep vehicles so that you can, parking away so you can see better.
And I'm more concerned with the south side of that intersection, because to me, that street on the south side is much narrower than Walnut
Yeah.
between Cherry and San Carlos Avenue.
I
That's a much
would agree,
wider street.
and there are parking issues, I think, on the other side.
Yeah.
I just, as an example, I
Yeah,
thought this
no,
was in the
I-
vicinity, but.
That's a good point.
So we can certainly do it on all four corners of this intersection and evaluate the distances for red curb and parking to make sure that, that it conforms to the code requirements.
Okay.
Okay. First, I'd like to start off by disclosing that I did spend an hour this morning talking with Mr. Morrow from Silverstone Properties about this project, and I think some of the other commissioners will want to disclose that. Okay. Commissioner Harper Pedersen?
And I spent
Commissioner Marsters?
an hour the other day talking to him.
Okay. And this particular topic occupied a fair amount of the time we were talking about this, about the project, was this particular intersection. And so I can understand that maybe this is not considered an environmental impact. It doesn't fall within the scope of the CEQA stuff, but it certainly seems like it has a community impact as part of development. So I'm wondering, once we, assuming that we wave the magic wand and all the money issues fall in line, that we're able to move into the design phase where we're reviewing the actual design of the project, will we have an opportunity to be able to identify this as an issue and and look at
What he's suggesting, I think.
other conditions at that point? Or should we be putting a condition in for the project along with this environmental impact report?
Off-site conditions should be addressed as part of the environmental document. And when we get into the design, it'll be primarily about the site itself and the building itself. So this is really the proper time. If you have suggestions for this intersection, as we discussed, then I would say that you should make it now.
Okay. Because my perception is you can look at it from the engineering point of view, and you can say it's adequate. We could also take this piece of property and go up the 50 feet that we can go up in a monolithic block and fit as many units as we can possibly fit, and that would be adequate. But it certainly is not what this community is interested in looking at, and it's not going to be part of the fabric of the way this community is going. And I think that when we start looking at the traffic issues, it's not just looking at the numbers. It is, what is the quality of life that, as perceived by the people who live here? We're not just looking at physical capacity. We're looking at the social elements of both traffic, the car access. More importantly, we keep pushing for fewer cars downtown, and it seems that the pathways that we're creating for pedestrians need to really be looked at, whether there is the flow of vehicles through that area based on engineering studies, or it's perceived as being a difficult intersection. And the fact that all 5 of us are agreeing on this, and I'm looking at the list of meetings we had for all of last year, and I'm not sure there's anything where all 5 of us completely agreed on it. But I think it becomes a, potentially as time goes on, it is a public welfare or a public safety issue. There's so much that is going on just a block away, and even though the farmer's market is only half of the year and it's only one day out of the week, I would hate to see for an accident to take place there because people are either hurrying to get to the farmer's market or to leave, whether they're walking or driving, and something happens there. And that's the intersection where I see that happening. That's kind of where everything all comes together, getting into the farmer's market, getting access to the parking. So I do think then that I would definitely support putting something, a condition in here, identifying this as an issue we have. I feel very strongly and agree with all the rest of you on that. So before we move on to the public comment, any other concerns that you had or for staff or questions that you had for staff?
I just had a quick question. It's not about traffic. Just with the mitigation monitoring and reporting, it's not clear to me, and maybe this is because I'm a little bit less experienced with this and newer to the commission. It's not clear to me what happens if the builder doesn't comply with the long list of mitigations. So, for example, if the signage isn't posted about who to call with complaints for vibrations, what happens? How does that happen? What kind of follow-up is there? What kind of repercussions are there?
Go ahead.
So from a SUCA perspective and in the monitoring report, generally what happens is you wouldn't allow them to pull the next permit if the conditions were not met. As far as code compliance, though, within each city, it's a little bit different how it's discovered that things are not complied with, but usually it's through the Public Works Department.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, hopefully that answers your question, but sometimes we get complaints from the public. Sometimes we have inspectors going out to the sites, and they're there all the time. Once construction begins, inspectors are there every couple of days. And so there's sort of an oversight by the city, and the city planner, who's in charge of the project management, also does site visits. So we rarely have these kinds of situations because it does slow construction down, and time is money. But that is kind of the way things happen. If we do see something, we'll talk to the on-site construction manager, try and get it worked out, or talk to the developer and they can work it out through their end. Depends on the level of the significance of what it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I have one request to speak. I don't know if anyone else who's here is interested in speaking to the commission. If you are, then you need to fill out one of the speakers' forms. This is it Janet Gervin? Please come up to the podium and state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Janet Jerome, and I live on Walnut. And I want to, should I begin right now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning quality of life, because I do represent, I've spoken before, so I won't be as long at speaking as I did once before. But you mentioned quality of life, and the people I've spoken with, were very concerned about the quality of life with this, moving forward with this whole project of Wheeler Plaza. It's just, they mentioned the transportation issue, and I agree with Steve and Scott. They should be taking a look at, did he mention the times that they have done this report on transportation? I think he said 4 to 6 p.m. What time are they? Do they do that? Because there's some peak times that I think that they have missed, because I live on Walnut, and I've lived here all my life, and I've noticed that the traffic in San Carlos, when I have to go to an appointment around 11:45 to about 1, it's loaded during that's one time. And then also Fridays are terrible. Everybody's, honking at each other and everything. They're very impolite. They're in a big hurry. Saturday, you start around maybe 10:30 to around, maybe 3:34, and it's packed with cars. When you have your whenever they have these events that they have, it's very dangerous. It's packed with people and cars and people. I'm surprised that they haven't had a lot of accidents and people getting hurt, because they have these festivals and all this other stuff, and it just creates so that's one issue. So I was wondering with the transportation people, if you can answer I'd like to have clarification on the times that they did their report, and they did not do Saturday, and did they do late on Fridays? And then I would also say at lunchtime, like 11:45 till about 1 o'clock. Those are some peak times. And also 4 o'clock isn't it? It's around 5 to 6 is very crowded weekdays. That was one issue. Yeah. And I also, the second issue, so that was one issue. I don't know if he's going to respond now or what we do at this point. We're going to have him respond, or to that, my question?
Would Matt wait to respond until let her finish first, and then Matt can respond?
Yes.
Okay, fine. And then the second thing, I wanted to know where we are with the Wheeler project at this point. So, I mean, it's very confusing to me. Where are we? How far along are we with it? With the proposal to move forward with the Wheeler project? That's the other question, and that's it.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be appropriate to respond to her 2 questions before we move on to the next public comment? Okay. So, yeah, would you please respond to her first question, and then Al, perhaps you can respond to where we are in the sequence of things?
Sure, okay. With regards to your question about what times were studied, it was 7 to 9 a.m. during the morning and 4 to 6 p.m. during the evening on weekdays.
Not at noon.
Not at noon. And so one thing to consider as well is that the uses that are going to be built here are going to be residential uses primarily, and that some retail uses will be removed as part of the project. And the peak times for residential are really around those time periods, the 4 to 6 p.m. and 7 to 9 a.m. Everyone's leaving their house and then coming back to their house after work. So while the retail may generate more trips during the noon times or Saturday times, really the peak times and the time that you're going to experience the most residential traffic is going to be during those study periods, which we did study.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Savay?
Yes, with regard to the process, it's a 2-step process. This is step one, is consideration of the environmental document, and step two would be the consideration of the project entitlements, meaning the design of it, the conditional use permit or planned community permit, what we call the entitlement phase. So this is the first step. If it goes to the city council and the city council approves or certifies the environmental document as adequate, the project would then move forward, and it would have to go through another round of similar meetings that we're having here, where then the planning commission would have a look at the design details, the massing, the skin of the building, how it looks, and the details of the actual development itself. And that's a whole other separate process from this going forward. And then that would then, your recommendation again, would then go to the city council for final determination. As I noted earlier, some of this is up in the air, whether we even go forward from here. It's uncertain as to whether the project is even going to move forward beyond this stage.
Okay, so there's no timeline, there's no estimated month in the future at which we expect a milestone event to take place?
Well, if things went forward and went to the city, let's say this goes to the city council in May, then we would probably start the entitlement phase in June or July, where we would start having some hearings in the summertime, maybe early summer, and then in the fall and winter for the entitlement phase. And then if the city approved the project, then there would be a delay of maybe 6 to 9 months, and then construction would start sometime in maybe the fall of 2013.
And do we know the timing then of the oversight board and successor agency in determining whether or not they're going to sell or gift the property, the Foodville and the furniture property?
I'd say in the next month.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker we have is Louis Vela, please.
Hi, good evening. Louis Bella, 1232, 1234 Cherry Street. It was interesting listening to this conversation, and it was pretty evident from the audience that a lot of you are not comfortable with some aspect of this project, especially the circulation. And it's obvious because you have engineers who are telling you the way it should be, and you guys live in the city and you know how it is. And I'll give you a couple of examples. My building is at 1232 Cherry Street, right across the alleyway from the HIP housing. There are big signs that says one way on that alleyway from the Wheeler Plaza. I guarantee you, and the engineers will tell you, 0 cars will pass through there. I guarantee you. This is not engineering. I guarantee you, at least between 5 to 10 cars go the wrong way. Why? It's human nature. They will go through Walnut. They will go to the intersection that Mr. Marsters mentioned, exactly the way he said it, and exactly the way you felt it. That's how it's going to go, okay? Because that is human nature. And as far as, and I've had several discussions with Mr. Sabay, and I respect a lot his expertise on these things. However, human nature is what it is. When you increase this project in that area, people are going to try to stay away from Laurel. Why? Because you have to stop every single almost parking place for somebody to back out into Laurel. So people avoid Laurel, and they will start circulating into these small streets, okay? And that's going to create a lot of problem for us as building owners and for the people who live in the area. As far as having staff look at it and then visit it another year, let's not kid ourselves. Don't be fooled. You're not if once it goes in, it's going to go in, it's going to be bad. Another example is the sandwich shop that you guys approved on Lower Laurel at the intersection of Laurel and Howard. Okay? A sandwich shop with no parking, not a single parking. Who did they use the parking? The parking at Gloucester Street was a private parking lot. That's the parking lot that they used. So the city approved a business with no parking, with the anticipation that they use somebody else's private parking place, like I would use your driveway if I had to park. It makes no sense. So in conclusion, what I'm going to say is that there's a lot of you that are uncomfortable. Please don't feel that you have to be pressurized to just go with the recommendation to the council. Don't do it yet. Don't do it yet. It's not ready. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in attendance here who would like to speak? Seeing none, could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So are there any other points of discussion or on this, or do we want to move forward to how and find out what the options might be for putting a condition on the project?
It seems as if that's our only and best option.
Does staff have any recommendation as how it would be appropriate for, because I'm looking through the resolution and it's not jumping out at me where it would be appropriate in a resolution format to be able to put that, or do we do the resolution separately and then the condition is something else?
The resolution refers to the mitigation measures in the monitoring plan, and you would probably put it in Exhibit B on page 11 where it talks about traffic impacts. And the one that seems closest to me is traffic impact 3 on page 11. Project generated bicycle and pedestrian traffic. The project would increase levels of bicycles and pedestrians in the vicinity. This report, though, concludes that the project includes adequate bicycle and pedestrian facilities and connections, and that it's less than significant impact. You're saying that, based upon your experience and some of the testimony from the public, that may not be the case. So you would want to put a recommended mitigation measure based upon the substantial evidence in the record about that. And my recommendation, and Mr. Save can correct me on that, or staff, would be to put a mitigation that, we make it as specific as possible, but I think you need to have some leeway because of we have the traffic engineers saying it's less than significant, and so we do have some dispute in the record, but we need to put it there if you're going to put it anywhere, I guess is the bottom line.
So I guess that's my confusion when we're talking about less than significant, that we can only define significant and less than significant based on certain parameters that the state is providing to us. Is that correct?
It's not, well, it's well defined in the CEQA guidelines, but this is an issue in my mind of the consultants and staff measuring against the city's general plan. The general plan is defining what a significant impact is. So when the consultants say, that it's less than significant impact, they're looking at our general plan and saying, for example, the streets are of adequate width to handle the traffic, just hypothetically. Well, they're saying in our general plan, our streets are only so big. They have the capacity to handle the level of traffic that's generated by the project. And then they also have the cumulative impact analysis to see what this project, what its contribution is to that cumulative impact. And that's why they've developed some mitigation measures that seem kind of minor, but that's because they're having to look at what the general plan says is total build out in the area.
So could we not have, I guess, the conclusion that it is in this category less than significant, but have mitigation measures added in, kind of what we've been talking about, and still have it? They're not mutually exclusive, correct?
They're not mutually exclusive, because that's why I was saying you have some evidence that you heard tonight
Right.
And so you're having trouble making the finding without addressing the pedestrian and vehicular issues that you've talked about.
And I think to add to that, what you're saying is you can see
looking at-
improving the situation, even though staff's saying that it's
Yes.
less than significant, you're saying it's still not good enough. We want to improve and prevent future problems. And so that's okay too, is to say, well, we're making it even better in a
Interrupt you.
preventative way.
It's not future problems, it's problems that we think are there and they're not being measured.
Right.
They're
And-
already
and-
there, it's not future.
Okay.
That's a distinguishing difference.
And,
Well, it
you know,
has to be related to the project.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, that's the other-
Right.
But there, and to your point, and to the attorney's point, we anticipate that these problems, although they were not measured and they are anecdotal based on public testimony, et cetera, and our own experience, it will be impacted by this project.
Yeah.
'Cause it's
And if I
already
could
at a
just
level
ask
that,
Will
the
be
commission to
exacerbated.
clarify
right.
what kind of mitigation you're talking about.
So here's my question. Not a quick one. This is a long one.
Right.
Can we recommend that, for example, here's sort of some of the things that I've written down. Can we recommend that the city staff address traffic concerns at Walnut and at the Walnut and Cherry intersection before the project starts? And then I have a list of possible ways that those can be addressed. We can address them by keeping an eye on the intersection through a yearly review, or by using the Traffic and Safety Task Force to look at the intersection, or by installing crosswalks, or looking at vehicles parked close to the intersection, or through another additional review by the Traffic and Circulation Commission. So there's 5 different possibilities in there that we could do. We're not necessarily saying any one of them needs to be done. What we're saying is that city staff needs to look at this intersection and how to address the concerns of the commissioners and the residents.
I'm comfortable with that.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Would you like me to read that again?
I was looking at I was
Okay.
looking at the mitigation measures that are in the.
Okay, so
Draft.
what I would recommend is that the city staff address the traffic concerns at the Walnut and Cherry intersection before the project starts. Several things that we can look at, and by possibly keeping an eye on the intersection through a yearly review, using the Traffic Safety Force to look at the intersection, by installation of crosswalks, or looking at the vehicles parked too close to the intersection, or through an additional review of the Traffic and Circulation Commission. So we're not recommending any one of those, but we're giving the staff multiple suggestions on,
Including but not limited to.
including but not limited to those 5.
You can add some mitigation measures to the project so you can make the findings. The more specific, the better, and what you can't do is defer the environmental review.
I'm not-
So you have to actually make the finding that these are mitigation measures. And then you add those as potential mitigation measures, but you can't defer the decision that further review may be required in the future.
Well, so let me ask a specific question then. So directing staff to have a heightened sensitivity to this and take appropriate action is not a mitigation measure?
It doesn't sound like a mitigation measure to me. It sounds like keep looking at it. And that might be something that would be in the entitlements also. I mean, some of these things some of the measures you'd be talking about are close enough to the project that they're not off-site improvements that Mr. Savay was talking about. They're more like project related. So those will be in the entitlement phase. But we're talking about, again, based upon the evidence in the record, what are the impacts that need to be mitigated by this
project.
by this project. So if there's a pedestrian safety impact that hasn't been identified, for example, then you'd want to have a specific mitigation. And I think the specific mitigation could be something like the Public Works Director shall install sidewalks crosswalks at the Cherry and Walnut Street intersection if it meets the city's standards for crosswalks. You have to tie it to the city's standards.
You mean the standards for putting in a sidewalk?
A
I mean, a
crosswalk.
crosswalk? Or, because is that a warranted process or not?
Well, it's not warranted by state law, but it's warranted by
Under
good
our-
engineering principles and, police safety issues, and so that's how we evaluate it. And I feel comfortable if the commission wants us to put in crosswalks and you direct us to do it based on, the city's procedures for consideration of crosswalks, I feel comfortable with that.
And the same would apply to other traffic improvements. If we have an objective standard that we're applying to it based upon the city's codes and it's being used as a mitigation, you're not deferring the environmental review. You're putting a mitigation measure on an impact that you've seen. So the more specific, the better. We don't have some of that information because we have our consultant saying no significant impact. We have some, and they're not. I mean, these are valid concerns. I'm just saying that we don't have the kind of engineering review that you'd usually have for a mitigation measure. So we're going to be saying, you have to say that the engineering standards of the, in my opinion, you have to put the engineering standards that the city has in place that would be an appropriate mitigation measure to the information you've heard tonight from the public about impacts. And possibly your own observations too, because some of this is your own personal experiences. The example is the narrowness of Walnut. I mean, one of the mitigation measures I heard suggested was to put some red parking lines. Well, there's city standards for doing that. The Traffic Commission looks at that stuff all the time. You're not deferring the environmental review by saying that the mitigation measure is the city will apply its traffic control standards or parking standards to the project. But deferring the environmental review would be, well, we should study that intersection and figure out the mitigation measures later.
No.
You can't do that.
Okay.
Okay, so this would be, you were talking about page 11, or would this be page 10, the first traffic item? Or we'd be working on an existing traffic
11,
impact?
Traf 3,
or-
right?
11, is it Traf 3 or Traf 4?
There's another place where mitigation
transit
measures are
demand.
mentioned in Exhibit A on page 8
6.
of the the
No.
mitigation measures and the verification, et cetera there. You might be able to add to that chart.
Well, which one was that again? I'm
On
sorry.
page 8 of Exhibit A of the MMRP, which is,
Oh, of Exhibit A.
The-
You're on A, not B.
okay, well, I mean, this is the one that has the specific mitigation measure, the timing, most of which are prior to certification of the occupancy permits or prior to issuance of building permits. So you probably want to put it there.
Right here.
And you might want to refer to it in B and identify that as a potential environmental impact on page 11 of B.
Okay, and would you suggest that we add a new line or work off of one of the existing ones?
On Exhibit A, page 8, I would add a new, I'm not sure what I would number it, but I'd add it, I would add it as a mitigation measure, probably referring to
There's a
traffic
line there.
3, because that's the one that talked about project-generated bicycle pedestrian traffic, and then you talked about vehicular traffic too, so you might make it 2 and 3, or
Exactly, there's actually two.
Or
on page
6.
11.
Six,
Yeah.
I was going to say, that also fits.
Yeah, that's, I was looking at either 1 or 6.
3 or 6?
1 or 6.
No, 1 is, yeah,
It's 3 and 6.
staff believes it's 3 and 6.
Me too.
3 and 6, okay.
And then you would have on the Exhibit A, you'd add traffic 3 and traffic 6, identify a mitigation measure, and then the timing.
3 would be the pedestrian
Yeah.
crosswalk, and 6 would be the road.
Yeah, right. And then, well, and then the,
Okay.
Would that echo the TRAF 8 implementation responsibility or TRAF 7 implementation responsibility line item? For each of those?
yes.
Coordinating with Public Works?
Again, just to be clear, the mitigation measures where you'd want to be as specific as possible. And if you don't have evidence that it's really needed to mitigate something, then I would not put it in there based upon the evidence that you have. If you think it's something that you believe is, would be an appropriate mitigation based upon the impacts of the project, I would put it in. And I gave 2 examples, but there might be others, Commissioner Marsters, that you
I
put
would
in.
like the wording that you actually.
Before we do that, though, I want to play devil's advocate for a second. I want to make sure there's a nexus to this project. I mean, I think that's critical because we made a lot of reference to existing conditions, but it's the delta above that we think is going to have an impact that's not taken into account, correct?
Pretty much what it looks like.
That's right. The environmental impact report is, the environmental impact report is a document that is an informational document that's studying the impact of this project. And there's a layer that causes people confusion sometimes, is that you have to fit in the impacts of this project not only to the current conditions, but the total build-out conditions, which are also called the cumulative impact conditions. So that's what and then you're measuring against what our general plan says is a significant impact. So you have your own experience and the public testimony tonight is the evidence that you have that there is potentially a significant impact. And then what you're saying is there's an impact, but if we use this mitigation measure, there's no longer a significant environmental impact. That's how the mitigation measures work. So if you're saying traffic 6, there's a pedestrian safety issue in the vicinity of the project, i.e. Cherry and Walnut, mitigation measure, sidewalks.
Crosswalks.
I said that, I did it again.
You guys are dying to put this.
There are, just for the record, there are 4 sidewalks at that
true.
intersection. I meant crosswalks.
So perhaps to Mr. Marster's question a couple minutes ago, with respect to what's specific in that first mitigation measure, you're saying installation of crosswalks pursuant to city standards, right?
Yes.
At the intersection of Walnut and Cherry.
Maybe as required per city standards.
I like that.
Yes.
And then with respect to timing, we've got a couple of options we see in here prior to issuance of construction permits or the COO. There's likely to be an impact during construction, I would think, even though no one's actually occupying it. There's going to be increased vehicular traffic.
Yeah, it's going to depend. The pedestrian one, maybe you can wait till occupancy, but
I would think that.
No,
I think that
I think it's before the construction.
Yeah, I thought
Nobody's
that's
going to be
where she would go.
nobody's going to be walking around while it's under construction.
Construction workers coming to and from their cars, going to the project site.
care about everybody, don't you?
I'm a lover.
Well, I think you have to take in the reality of when usually these types of improvements are put in. They're usually put in at the end. I mean, there's other,
No.
there's
I-
other,
Bring it up.
Driving over it and everything else?
yeah, I mean, you're going to have a crosswalk that's going to have construction vehicles going over it, and, there's other things that,
Yeah, that's a good point.
COO. And I think under verification, it's the same ones, under 7 and 8, right?
Yes.
With the monitoring action?
Monitoring action and the responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all those.
Yeah.
All right, so you're installing sidewalk crosswalks.
Yeah.
What else are you doing there, Scott?
Okay, so the only question I have is, while I was writing some of that, was the ongoing monitoring. How do we sort of put that under?
Ongoing monitoring of what?
That intersection.
Of that intersection. So I think I can address the two specifics where the installation of crosswalks and looking at the vehicles parked close to the intersection. But how do we put in that yearly review?
Not in this document, right?
Yeah,
Do that? Do we do that as
isn't that
part of the?
Isn't that part of looking at traffic and circulation overall in the city? And that would be something that people would have to submit a
Yeah, I think
Complaint?
I think the problem is that it goes to that further study area, and it's not really a mitigation to say we're going to continue to monitor.
So do we just sort of ignore that for now and?
I would say it's a back burner item until if it goes to the next phase, where something like that could be addressed.
Okay.
Because this is,
But that could be,
It's
that
a
could be
Sequidoc.
an issue in the actual design of.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
yes.
It could potentially.
PC.
It's going to, there's some legal standards that would apply to that, but that could be it. And then normally how these things happen is the Transportation and Circulation Commission might look at an issue that comes up, because a lot of times they come up, again, might not necessarily be related to this project. It might be something else that's going on in downtown, or trends that are causing the need for something. So it gets to that nexus point that was mentioned.
Okay, so what is going to go in Exhibit A under our mitigation measures would then also show up in Exhibit B under the recommended mitigation measures for 3 and 6. So instead of it saying no mitigation warranted, it would, do we need to change the description of the potential environmental impacts to specifically identify the intersection of Cherry and Walnut, or do we just identify that in the recommended mitigation measures?
We bring it from Exhibit A. Doesn't it populate this
Right.
section?
And,
Okay.
and we also, in the resolution on page 9, with regard to point 8, traffic impacts, we will write the findings as you have stated them, that you based it on conclusions other than what are in the FEIR.
Do you want me to go ahead with this? Okay.
So what are you seeing as
What
being?
I'm seeing is,
mitigation measures?
under TRAF 3, Cherry and Walnut pedestrian safety issue, install crosswalks pursuant to city standards. Okay?
As required by city standard.
As required by city standard. And that way, we're following the city standards and trying to take care of it. The timing prior to the issue of certificate of occupancy. So I just essentially take everything that's in TRAF 8 and bring it down to cover those. The only question I had is the monitoring responsibility. My feeling is that it's the building division, or is it the planning division?
Public Works Department.
Public Works. Okay, so let's make that Public Works. Okay, and so the next one beneath that is also Traf 6. Vehicle parking issue at Cherry and Walnut. Paint curbs red as required by city standards.
I think, don't we need to be more specific about what the purpose is, that the
Yeah,
curbs are
it's
going to be painted red
traffic-related.
to improve
Okay.
the throughput of traffic,
Yeah.
or something like that?
That's the impact that you're trying to mitigate.
Right.
Is the
Constipation.
is the congestion caused by parking too close to the corners,
Improve the,
and then your mitigation is
Yeah,
to
congestion.
require red painted curbs to city standards to mitigate that.
so alleviate traffic congestion at Cherry and Walnut. Paint curbs red as required by city standards. And then using that, you can populate the rest of the document with the appropriate.
Now, I earlier heard that maybe that there would be a comment added, and I'm not sure if we still need that, something saying that this is, based on evidence and record from the public and commission comments. That's where that would go, would be in the resolution findings. It doesn't need to be in either of these tables, then?
No.
Okay.
I think the other place I was referring to, in addition to what Ms. Nelson was talking about as far as in the resolution, is Exhibit B talks about whether mitigation is warranted. That's kind of a different table. And on page 11, it talks about, it goes through all the traffic impacts. So you would want to add that you believe there was potentially a significant impact, and instead of saying no mitigation warranted, you would
refer to Exhibit A.
you'd put the same information from the other chart.
Right.
It was in
there.
Exhibit A, the same words would populate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
talked about that.
So, and staff is clear on the fact that.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
make them mirror consistent.
Get our laptop, we could have knocked this out.
Okay. Because both of those, the way they stand right now, the conclusion is this is a less than significant impact, yet we're identifying mitigation. So are we still saying this is a less than significant impact?
Yeah, I'm confused over how you meld those two together.
General plan standard.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that you're saying that you're not certain that it's a less than significant impact. So it's a potentially significant impact that you're addressing with this mitigation measure. That's the way you would normally do it.
So you add a sentence after this is less than significant impact, or you leave it as it is and just put the recommend, I mean, somehow you have to connect those two, no?
Yeah,
So
why-
if you look at, say, page 8 is a good example.
Page
Yeah.
8,
Traffic 5 in the recommended mitigation measure
Sorry,
says what the,
resulting, I'm
says
sorry.
what the mitigation is, and then by doing that, it's still less than significant.
I'm sorry, I didn't read the top of it. It says resulting level, meaning
That-
it would still be no significant impact.
And that's why I had my initial question out of the gate, which was, they're not mutually exclusive. We can have mitigation measures and it'll still result in something less than significant.
And this allows city staff to look at the crosswalks and make the decision about whether it meets the city standards or not. And if it doesn't meet the city standards, then they may make the decision not to put it in. All we're asking them to do is to, if it does meet the city standards, then they can put crosswalks in, right?
Yeah, and that's specific enough.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you guys comfortable?
And then
with
is-
this?
Oh, no,
Okay.
I think that was, this was good land use work.
Okay.
I love that.
Okay, so, and then, so on page 9 of the resolution, under traffic impact, 3 and 6 will be added.
Page 9. Where are you at?
That, and we don't need to
Oh,
be
I'm sorry.
prescriptive
The main
in,
document, okay.
Yeah.
okay, and everyone's fine, we don't need to be prescriptive in how that is going to be reworded?
No, we
Yeah.
can let city
Static.
staff.
Okay.
Right,
I
we'll
just
do
wanted to
it-
make sure
Based on-
there was a consensus that everyone was fine with doing that. Okay. Okay. So are we ready then to make a motion subject to those changes? Or are there any other areas that you have concerns about or questions that you have?
That was everything for me.
Yep, same here.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
All right, very good. Could I have a motion, please?
Why don't you do it, Scott? Because are you going
Yeah.
to put all that
He
stuff
loves
in?
it.
Or are you going to say as,
Well, I was going to say, as the changes
as,
discussed.
as discussed? Check the
As
tape.
discussed, yeah. So I move that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 2012-02, resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Carlos concerning the Wheeler Plaza redevelopment project, 2.65 acres located in downtown San Carlos. Assessors parcel numbers 050132 260, 050132 170, 050132 180, 050132 230, 050132 140, 050132 110, 050132 100, recommending that the City Council adopt a final environmental impact report, adopt a mitigation monitoring and reporting program, adopt mitigation measures
As amended.
as amended, and make findings concerning significant effects, mitigation measures, and alternatives, all in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, based on the findings incorporated in the resolution of the Planning Commission and for the reasons stated in the staff report.
I'd suggest
amended.
you suggest findings incorporated in the resolution of the Planning Commission as amended
As amended.
also.
Okay.
Second.
As amended.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Okay, reports, correspondence, and general information. Report on recent city council actions.
As I reported earlier, that City Council considered whether or not they would like to enhance the green building code, and they've asked the building official to bring back a code which has greater enhancements than the 15% above Cal Green, to include a requirement that it meet a specific checklist that was advocated by the environmental community, the Green Point checklist.
So as a, for the planning commission, will that, once that becomes part of the building code, is that something that will impact the staff reports and the application packages that we see here? Or is that something that happens after?
No,
An
where
application
we
is
had
submitted
put
to
it
us.
before we adopted the code, particularly in the RDRC packets, we suggested to people, we gave them, here's a sample of something you might consider. Now it will be in code at the building permit phase. They'll have to take into account how they meet these standards.
Okay, thank you. Okay, planning commission comments or reports?
I just have one comment, and I don't know if this is the best place to do it, but it's where I'm going to do it. I wanted to mention something about my style being a new planning commissioner and knowing that not everybody's had the chance to hear me deliberate on a ton of issues. Oh.
Well, that guy did.
And I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm very thoughtful and deliberate in the way I do things, and as I'm sure everybody up here is. But I want to admit that my questions don't always give insight to how I'm thinking and to how I'm coming up with my logic and reasoning. And I just wanted to let you guys know that I plan on getting better at that and making sure that my questions and my comments are making it public what is going on in my reasonings and my conclusions. So,
Okay. And I would respond from my point of view is that if there's not a clarity in what I'm saying, that will help you then as you're getting more comfortable in your planning commission role, which I think you've been doing a great job at. But if there's anything that would help to better articulate where I am coming from or why I'm saying something, or maybe the between the lines needs to be fleshed out, please say something about that. I think none of us have own the best way of doing things, but we all bring different things, different approaches to the table, and I think the more we can share those, the better. So I appreciate you bringing the topic up. So, any other comments from commissioners
I think
that
you're
are
all doing a
appropriate
great
to be
job.
videotaped?
This is not an easy job.
Okay.
And I think we all come from different perspectives, and that's what's important for a planning commission, is to have 5 different voices up here.
Okay. I attended the EDAC meeting this week, which was interesting. They discussed the successor agency and a fair amount of detail. And I understand there are going to be 3 successor agency meetings during the month of April. I'm assuming that those will be coming out on eNotify the way the first one was. But if anyone is interested in more information and lacks having taped something to watch, a TV show that's good to watch at home, and you'd like some other entertainment, then you could go to one of those meetings. But just to kind of let everybody know that is coming up. And there was an informal commissioners meeting that both myself and Commissioner Marsters attended last Thursday evening with 2 commissioners from Parks and Rec, the outgoing chair and the incoming chair, and Keith Tabachek from EDAC, and council member Ron Collins. So that's kind of part of those quarterly meetings that some of you, I believe, may have attended in the past. And it was very helpful in just getting to talk to people that we haven't talked to before and find out different things that they're working on about the trees in Burton Park and some other things like that. But just I would share that information with you. And then this Friday morning, I will be following up with Mayor Klein with a kind of a quarterly meeting update. He and I met back in January, and we're going to do a follow-up to that, to kind of get together and talk about what's happening, and kind of after the city's the retreat and the strategic planning update and all of that, and make sure that we're clear on how that fits with our work plan. So those were the things that I wanted to share with all of you that I have been taking a look at. Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Okay. Correspondence. Planning staff comments, reports, and updates of current projects.
An email with the link to the strategic plan and the successor agency report that went to the council, and I think we've covered those in another context of the meeting. You will have a meeting on the 16th of April, 3 items. And that's all I have to report tonight.
Okay. I was wondering if I noticed on the, I guess it was the objectives list sheet that came out of the strategic planning, that the council would be getting an update on the East Side Connect project around July 1st, or before July 1st. That was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if perhaps the Planning Commission might be able to get some kind of a summary of that update, or...
Absolutely. yeah, we'll
That would-
give you one also.
That would be great. And the other project I was wondering if we might be, if there is any update we might get in a future meeting would be on the 665 Prospect.
Oh, yeah.
Was
forgot
that
about it.
6 or 7 homes? I can't remember how many now, unless maybe the latest rains washed the creek, with the creek washed all the property away. I don't know.
We are reviewing the applications that are sort of pre-building permit right now, so it is moving forward through Public Works, and the project is a go. It's just not
Oh, okay,
quickly.
'cause
But
it's been about a year, so
But
I
the
was
team,
curious.
the team has picked it up, the development team has picked it up, and it is moving forward, so it will be a project.
Okay. And apparently there is no update on the downtown parking plan. That was the other item on my list to ask about. So, okay, we'll just wait until you get to go to one of those meetings. Okay.
Deborah, it sounds like the Transit Village is coming our way, and since there are two of us who were not on the commission when the EIR came to the group, is there any additional information that you can give the two of us to begin to be a little bit more prepared for that?
That's a really good idea. So I can send you, well, it's on our website. And then e-packets, there would have been when we reviewed the draft. And as I recall, it was over a year ago. So I will send you the date that you can find the Planning Commission's packet and minutes. Or I'll just put them in your next packet if you'd prefer paper version. Yeah.
That'd be
Yes.
great for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the
Just so-
Planning Commission deliberations, including the minutes, but the draft EAR, if you'd like a hardbound copy, if we still have some around, I can also give you those, as your colleagues probably have them too.
I'd like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to look and see if I still have an
Yeah,
old
okay.
copy or not.
Okay, I'll be
But
happy
If you
to-
have a copy, I would
Be
I
happy
would
to
like
get
it.
those to you.
Okay. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.